Zamara, with this your tiny body, no man in Umuata will marry you.
Papa, I hope this will give me the shape and curves in 7 days. I need to look curvy.
Don't worry, my child. You will see the results you desire.
A woman with big breasts and curvy body is the only criteria a woman should have to be considered for marriage.
They called her Broom Zamara. Too thin, too plain, not enough to be a wife, in a village obsessed with one thing, a woman's figure. While every other young woman in Umuata chased the herbalist tonics to fill out their bodies and win the eyes of the village's most eligible men, Zamara made a different choice. She used what little money her family had to save her dying father and endured 3 years of mockery for it. But quiet work builds louder things than gossip ever can. This is the story of a girl the whole village underestimated, and the moment everything she built finally spoke louder than every insult thrown her way. Subscribe for more powerful African folktales and cinematic stories every week. Like this video if you believe worth is built, not won. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We read every single one.
The market bell had barely rung when the first stone hit Zamara's basket, scattering yams across the dust. "Look at her, flat as a dry riverbed," a girl shrieked, and laughter rippled through the crowd like wind through dry corn stalks. Zamara didn't flinch. She knelt, gathered her yams one by one, and kept moving. Behind her, 3 young women adjusted their wrappers to show off wide hips and fuller waists, preening for the men who watched from the shade of the iroko tree. Ah, Zamara, still trying to sell yams like a common laborer. A woman's true harvest is in her body, not her farm. Zamara straightened, met her eyes without blinking, and said nothing. She had learned over 3 long years that silence cost her nothing, while every word she gave them became a weapon they'd throw back at her twice as hard. If you're just joining us, welcome. Drop a comment and let us know where in the world you are watching from tonight, because stories like Zamara's deserve to travel far. 3 years ago, Umuata had not always been this way. It began, as these things often do, with the young men of the village, restless, admired, full of their own opinions about what made a wife worth pursuing. It started as talk under the iroko tree, the kind of boastful fireside comparison young men indulge in when no elder is close enough to correct them. Ikenga's own circle of friends had been among the loudest, joking that only a woman with a full waist and a fuller figure could ever hold a man's attention long enough to marry her. The joke did not stay a joke. It spread from the young men to their mothers, from mothers to daughters, until an entire generation of young women in Umuata believed their futures depended on becoming exactly what those fireside conversations had described. Traders were quick to sense opportunity in appetite. Within a season, herbalists from beyond the river began selling tonics and enhancement herbs, promised to widen a woman's hips and fill out her figure faster than food or rest ever could. Young women lined up at dawn outside the herbalist's hut, trading coins, cloth, even their mother's jewelry for gourds of bitter paste and murky tonic. What began as 1 or 2 curious girls became an obsession that swallowed the village whole. Young women skipping meals of real nourishment in favor of the herbs, comparing results at the well the way farmers once compared harvests, judging and being judged daily on how fast and how full they had grown. Mothers who once taught their daughters to farm now taught them how much tonic to take and when. Suitors stopped asking what a woman could build and started only asking what she looked like standing still. And somewhere in that shift, Zamara, slender, quick on her feet, born to run and lift and dig, and stubbornly unwilling to touch a single drop of the herbalist's tonics, became invisible to everyone except her father. "Zamara, my daughter," her father DK rasped one evening, his voice thin as smoke, "do not let them make you something you are not." She had held his hand that night, feeling how it trembled, how the fever had eaten away the strength that once carried sacks of cassava without complaint. The healer had already come and gone, shaking her head, naming a price for the bark and roots that could ease him, a price the family did not have. "I won't, Papa. I promise you." That promise cost her everything the village said mattered. While Machi and the others spent their family's coins on fattening porridge and rest, Zamara spent hers on seed yams and a second-hand hoe. While they lounged under shade cloths to preserve their figures, she walked 2 hours each morning to till a strip of land no one else wanted, because no one else believed thin arms could break stubborn soil. "You'll kill yourself before you fatten yourself," old Mama Cora warned her one morning, not unkindly, watching her hands blister against the hoe handle. "No man in Umuata will look twice at a woman built like a broom." "Then I will feed my father with broom hands," Zamara answered, and kept digging. The mockery didn't stay in the market. It followed her home in whispers, into the well where women drew water and traded gossip like currency. They called her Broom Zamara, Dust Woman, the girl too poor and too plain to matter. Children mimicked her thin frame in the street, puffing out their chests and mocking her walk. And still, every evening she came home with a basket a little fuller than the last, and every coin went toward her father's medicine. If this story is already gripping you, hit that subscribe button and like right now. It helps more people discover Zamara's journey, and trust me, it's about to get a lot heavier. The turning point came on the night DK's fever broke for the first time in months. Zamara sat beside him, exhausted, her palms raw and cracked, and he reached for her hand. "They mock you because they cannot see what I see, Zamara. A river does not need to be wide to carve through stone, Zamara. It only needs to keep moving."
She wept then, not from sadness, but from something harder to name, a mixture of exhaustion and stubborn hope. "I'm so tired, Papa. Tired of being laughed at. Tired of eating one meal so you can eat two. Tired of walking past that tree every morning and hearing them call me names before the sun is even up." "Then don't walk past them," Daike said, his eyes fierce despite his weakness. "Walk through them. Let your harvest speak when your voice grows tired." She took his words as instruction, not comfort. The following season, Zamara didn't just farm for survival. She farmed to build something none of them could mock away. She learned to read the soil the way her father once had, planting cassava where others saw only rock, timing her harvest to beat the market glut so her yams sold for triple the price. She began trading cloth for grain, grain for tools, tools for more land, turning every small profit into the seed of the next. The village noticed, but not kindly. "She thinks farming makes her a man," Machi sneered at the well one morning, loud enough for Zamara to hear as she passed, with 2 baskets balanced on a pole across her shoulders. "No husband will want a wife with calluses instead of curves." Zamara kept walking, though something in her chest tightened like a fist. That night, alone with her father sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself just once to sit outside under the stars and let the tears come freely. "Mama," she whispered to the sky, remembering the mother she'd lost too young. "Was I wrong to choose this? Was I wrong to choose him over what they wanted me to be?" The wind offered no answer, but something in her settled anyway.
a quiet certainty that she had chosen the only thing that could not be mocked away, the truth of her own hands and what they had built with nothing. We want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between what people expected of you and what you knew was right? Tell us your story. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss how far Zamara's journey goes. By the second harvest season, Zamara owned more land than her father ever had. She hired 2 young men from a neighboring village to help her clear a new field, paid them fairly and on time, and earned a reputation among traders 3 villages over as a woman whose word was worth more than most men's signatures. Yet, in Umuata itself, she remained an outsider, respected from a distance by the elders who watched her prosperity grow, but still whispered about by the young women who couldn't understand how someone so plain, so thin, so unremarkable to look at could be thriving while they, with all their curves and their careful diets, struggled to find husbands willing to work as hard as they ate. It was at the height of that second harvest that Ikenga first truly saw her, not as the village's punchline, but as something else entirely. He had come to broker a trade dispute between 2 farmers, a task given to him because his father was chief among the elders and his word carried weight beyond his years. Zamara stood at the center of it, calm where the 2 men shouted, patient where they postured, until she laid out a solution so fair that even the angriest of the 2 farmers nodded in reluctant agreement. "You settled that faster than my own father could have," Ikenga said afterwards, studying her with new eyes. "I only asked what was fair," Zamara replied simply, already turning back to her work. Ikenga said nothing more that day, but he found himself thinking of her voice long after the sun had set. Steady, unshaken, utterly unlike anything the village had trained him to admire, and yet more compelling than anything he had known before. Ikenga mentioned her name at dinner that night, carefully, testing the water. The trader's daughter, Zamara. She settled the boundary dispute between the 2 farmers today. Fair terms, no bribes, no shouting. His father, Chief Eloka, grunted without looking up from his meal. The thin one, the one they call Broom Zamara? She has a mind sharper than most men twice her age, Ikenga said, an edge of defensiveness that surprised even him. A mind means nothing in this village if the body does not match it, his father replied flatly. You are the son of a chief, Ikenga. When you choose a wife, you choose the future face of this family. Choose wisely and choose what the people expect. Ikenga said nothing, but the words sat uneasily in his chest for days afterward. Meanwhile, Zamara's life did not pause to notice the attention of a chief's son. Her days remained a relentless cycle of labor, waking before the cocks crow, walking her land, negotiating with traders who once dismissed her and now sought her out, and returning each night to sit beside her father, whose health had grown steadier but never fully strong. She had begun teaching 2 younger girls from the village basic trade arithmetic in secret at their own quiet request, since their mothers would have forbidden it outright. Why do you help them? Her father asked one evening, watching her sketch numbers into the dirt floor by lamplight for a girl named Adesi. The same girls whose sisters mock you at the well. Because someone has to show them there's another way, Zamara said. I can't change what the whole village believes, but I can change what one girl believes about herself. Word of these lessons spread quietly, and not everyone approved. Machi's mother confronted Zamara outright one afternoon at the market, her voice sharp enough to draw a small crowd. Stay away from our daughters, Broom Zamara. We didn't raise them to end up thin and husbandless like you. Zamara felt the old sting rise in her chest, familiar as an old wound reopening, but she held her ground evenly. "I didn't ask them to look like me," she said evenly. "I only taught them to count what's owed to them, in coin and in respect. If that frightens you, ask yourself why." The crowd went silent. No one had ever spoken back to Machi's mother that way, not least the girl the whole village had spent 3 years mocking. Zamara walked away before the silence could turn into something else, her heart hammering, unsure if she had just made things better or infinitely worse for herself. That night, she confided in her father again, her voice trembling with something between fear and exhilaration. "Papa, I think I finally said what I've wanted to say for 3 years. DK smiled weakly from his mat, pride flickering in his tired eyes. "And did the sky fall?" he asked. "No," Zamara admitted, almost laughing despite herself. "Then perhaps it was never as dangerous as they made you believe," he said. "Keep going, my daughter. The river is close to the stone now. I can feel it." If you've made it this far, you already know this story is only getting started. So smash that subscribe button now so you're here when Zamara's whole world turns upside down. And tell us in the comments, what's one moment in your life where speaking up changed everything?
The third harvest arrived with a storm that flooded half the low fields in Umuata, and it was Zamara's stores, carefully rationed, wisely built, that kept 3 families from starving through the following weeks. She didn't advertise it. She simply sent baskets quietly to the homes that needed them, including, to everyone's shock, Machi's own household, whose father had lost nearly his entire crop to the flood. Machi found her at the well the next morning, arms crossed, jaw tight with something that looked almost like shame. "Why would you help my family? After everything my mother said to you, after everything I said to you?" Zamara set down her water pot slowly. "Because hunger doesn't care whose mouth mocked me and whose didn't. I wasn't going to let your little brothers go without food to prove a point." Machi's eyes filled unexpectedly, and she looked away quickly. "I don't understand you," she muttered. "You don't have to," Zamara said, not unkindly. "You just have to stop confusing my body for my worth. It was never the same thing. My mother still says you did it out of spite, that you starved yourself thin just to make the rest of us look foolish." Zamara's head shook slowly. "I never once thought about the rest of you when I chose this life, Machi. I thought about my father's fever. I thought about medicine we couldn't afford. Everything else, the mockery, the names, the way your mother looks at me like I'm something spoiled, that was never mine to carry. I just carried it anyway because I had no choice." "And now?" Machi asked. "Now I choose what I carry, and I'm done carrying shame that was never mine." She walked away before either of them could say more, but something had cracked open in the village that morning, a small, uncomfortable seed of doubt planted in the very people who had laughed loudest. It was the naming ceremony for Chief Eloka's newest grandchild, weeks later, that brought the whole of Umuata together under one roof, and it was there that everything finally broke into the open. The compound overflowed with guests, music, palm wine, and the usual parade of young women dressed and postured to catch the eye of eligible men. Zamara came only because her father insisted, leaning on her arm, proud despite his frailty to finally be seen walking beside his thriving daughter. Ikenga found her near the edge of the gathering, away from the music, where she stood watching rather than performing. "You never come to these things," Ikenga said. "I never have a reason to," Zamara replied. "Tonight, my father wanted to see people again. That's reason enough."
I've watched you for almost a year now, Ikenga said, his voice lower, stripped of the polish he used with everyone else. Everyone in this village decided who you were before you ever opened your mouth. I did too, if I'm honest. I laughed with my friends under that tree before I ever really looked at you. Zamara's expression didn't soften easily. And now you're looking? Now I can't stop, Ikenga said. You built something out of nothing while they mocked you for it. You forgave people who didn't deserve forgiveness. I've never met anyone like you, Zamara, and I'm done pretending I haven't noticed. Before she could answer, his father's voice cut through the gathering like a blade. Ikenga? Chief Eloka had appeared behind them, his face thunderous, his eyes flicking between his son and the woman the whole village still called Broom Zamara. A word, now.
The confrontation that followed happened in full view of the crowd, voices rising until the music itself faltered into silence. I did not raise you to shame this family. Choose a wife the village respects, or choose to lose everything I have built for you. The entire compound had gone still, every eye fixed on father and son. Ikenga's hands trembled, but his voice, when it came, was steadier than anyone expected. Respect built on a woman's waistline isn't respect at all, father. It's fear dressed up as tradition. I would rather lose your inheritance than lose the chance to stand beside someone who actually deserves to be admired. He turned, walked the length of the compound in front of everyone, and stood beside Zamara. I choose her, he said, loud enough for every whispering mouth in Umuata to hear. Not because of what she looks like, because of who she is. The silence that followed felt like a lifetime. Then, from the back of the crowd, an old, cracked voice broke it. Mama Cora, who had once warned Zamara that no man would look twice at her. The boy is right, she said, shuffling forward, tapping her walking stick against the packed earth. I have lived 70 years in this village, and I have never once seen a full waist harvest a field, nurse a sick father, or feed a hungry neighbor. Shame on all of us for forgetting what actually matters. Murmurs spread through the crowd, uneasy, reluctant, but real. Machi stepped forward next, her voice shaking but clear. I fed my family when we had nothing. I mocked her for years and she still chose kindness. If that's not worth admiring, I don't know what is. Chief Eloka stood rigid for a long moment, jaw walking, pride visibly warring with the truth unfolding in front of him. Finally, his shoulders dropped, just slightly. Perhaps I have been chief long enough to have forgotten what actually builds a village. It is not waistlines, Ikenga. It was never waistlines. DK, watching from his seat, with tears sliding freely down his weathered face, reached for his daughter's hand as she returned to him, trembling with disbelief. The river reached the stone, he whispered, his voice breaking on every word, as though he had waited his whole life to say it. You are right, Papa, Zamara said, laughing through her own tears. You were right all along. In the months that followed, Umuata changed in ways no one could have predicted. The herbalist who once sold tonics by the godful found his hut empty of customers, his trade quietly dying as young women redirected their mornings toward trade lessons, farming, and craft instead. Adaeze, the girl who Zamara had once taught numbers to in secret, became the village's youngest recognized trader within 2 years. Machi herself apprenticed under Zamara the following season, calluses replacing the soft hands she'd once been so proud of.
Zamara and Ikenga married that harvest in a ceremony the whole village attended, not to see her figure, but to witness the woman who turned 3 years of mockery into the very lesson that reshaped Umuata's future. Dike lived to see it, standing tall beside his daughter, prouder than words could ever fully hold, his frail hands steady for the first time in years as he placed them over hers. Years later, when new mothers in Umuata sat their daughters down to talk about worth, they no longer spoke of waistlines or tonics. They spoke of Zamara, the girl who chose her father over vanity, who turned humiliation into harvest, who proved once and for all that a village's judgment could be wrong and a single person's resilience could be strong enough to change it. Even the herbalist's abandoned hut became part of the village memory. Children would point at its crumbling roof and ask their mothers why it stood empty, and the answer, passed down like a proverb, was always the same: because Umuata finally remembered what its daughters were truly worth. If Zamara's story moved you tonight, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the next one. Drop a like if you believe worth is built, not won, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and which moment in this story hit you hardest. We'll see you in the next story.